Hey, it's Phae and this is A Day with Phae. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a bunch of helpful tips when looking for your wedding venue. And I'm also going to show you guys our wedding venue search vlog. So this is going to sound super common sense, but I promise you it's so important because typically you're either buying your wedding dress first or you're going to buy your venue first. And typically that's because when you get your venue set, you have a date set, and then all the other vendors can now tell you if they're available during that time. And not only that, sometimes your venue dictates what kind of dress you're gonna wear, etc. The thing that you need to be 100% on is your budget. Now, wedding venues can really typically cost around half your budget. Typically. That's what it was in our case, and it's something really to take note of. So again, think of your budget and have that in mind when you look at these wedding venues. Now, just because you see a venue that is a little outside your range by maybe like $1,000, $2,000, I would still email them, call them, and try to figure out if they have special prices for a smaller wedding party. So that's something to keep in mind. If you see a venue that could be potentially the venue of your dream, maybe have a smaller wedding party so that you can afford it. I know that when we start wedding planning, we're like, let me invite all these people that I know and love, and then you look at wedding venues that cater to that big size group, and it's just really sobering. So that's something to note. And the really annoying thing is that what you see on search engines are not always correct, or they don't have a price. In my experience, that's kind of what I found when I was searching on Wedding Wire and also on The Knot, specifically for venues. It varies on the size of your guests. Some venues make you include food, etc. So I really liked going on Wedding Spot, which is a really small website and doesn't have all the venues, but it literally broke down the price of every single thing. So that's something to consider. But that will give you a kind of price for the area you're looking to get married in. What is the price per like guest around-ish? So originally, Mike and I wanted to have a lot more people at our wedding. But unfortunately, at the area that we're at, that was just not gonna do. So we went to a couple of wedding venues. They were out of our price range and we were trying to make it work, kind of contemplating like, oh, what if we had a really small wedding, which is what we ended up doing, because we valued more about having it at a great place and have a great ambiance versus having every single person there. Now, another thing to note, and I touched on this earlier, is that you should check to see if your venue requires you to have food with them. Sometimes certain venues make you have catering with them, or they make you have catering from a preferred set of lists. So it's kind of like when you look at your options, you kind of have to look at how much the food costs you, so that way you have that also padded into your budget. Again, like ours, food and venue was more than half of our, just a little more than half of our whole entire budget. Ours required us to have catering booked through them. Sometimes they have restaurants cater them, so just try a meal at that restaurant, see if you like it. And sometimes the food that they require you to get is a little expensive, so if you are on a budget and you really do like that venue you walk through, just tell them, say, hey, I'm kind of on a constrained budget. I'm wondering what are your more cost-effective options for vendors, and see if they can help you out. And they'll tell you what price ranges are and say you need to know that up front before you sign with the venue, which is something that I did at a couple places, and then I was like, oh, yeah, we can't afford this, okay, bye. They let you bring whatever kind of catering you want. Sometimes much more affordable options that you can do through grocery stores, which sounds crazy, but if you live in Florida, Publix has amazing catering options, and depending on how close you are to their like catering facility, they can help you out. And I originally wanted to have Publix because they were very cost effective, but unfortunately I could not find a venue that I liked a lot that would also fit in my price range and would also let me have outside catering. So that's just something to note. I know that Whole Foods does it too. I did not really look at the pricing at that, so that's just something to look at. Potentially other grocery stores in your area do catering as well, and they are gonna be much more cost effective usually than catering nearby. Something also really highly to consider, like we live in the Miami area, and typically there are not a lot of venues that are in our price range that are in the city center, you know what I'm saying? There were a couple that we looked at that were like an hour away. like way South Florida, Redland, Florida. And if you're gonna have a lot of out-of-towners, which we did, most of our guest list was out-of-towners, ideally you want your venue to be nearby an airport or doable or somewhat. An hour away from the airport, that's not really doable unless I'm trying to like provide transportation, and like I said, we were trying to save money. That's not really a great idea. And not to mention that these were in a lot of like farm like areas, so when people are thinking, oh, we're gonna go to Fort Lauderdale, Miami area, it's gonna be poppin', and then their hotel where we suggest is nearby like a farmland area, they might be a little bit disappointed. There's not really a lot of stuff to do nearby throughout the whole weekend. So that was something that like we would find venues that we liked, but they weren't necessarily like in a poppin' part of town. But then again, if you have most of your wedding guests people who are local, then they can easily drive there and it's not gonna be that big of a deal, and you're gonna have like sprinkles of people who are out-of-towners, which I'm sure you can try to accommodate and help them out. Another thing to note too is that sometimes venues will have different prices for different days. So originally Mike and I were looking at weekday options because, for example, we found one venue that was like $15,000 on the weekend, but then was $5,000 to rent on a weekday. And we're like, okay, well, we really love this place, we might make it work, let's maybe do a weekday. And then that will also trickle your guest list pretty down because most people can't make weekdays, but we figured that the key players were gonna make it no matter what if we give them enough like notice in advance. Now, if you're like, I don't really feel like doing a weekday option, totally get you. That is a little bit out of the box and not like normal. So another thing to consider is maybe they have a brunch option. That's what we did. The venue that we ended up choosing was the historic Maxwell Room. Beautiful venue, we loved it so much. It was just like in the heart of Fort Lauderdale. It was very close to the airport. There were a ton of hotels nearby of all price ranges, and the beach was nearby. Like there's just so much to do near our venue that it was perfect for our out-of-towners for our destination to them wedding, you know? So we found this venue, really cool, but unfortunately when we looked at the prices, because they made you get catering from the restaurant that they were attached to, and the dinner prices were just way out of our budget, even though we had a small party. So we saw that they had a brunch option. It was awesome. I think if I remember correctly, it was about 3 times cheaper than having it at dinner. And we really like brunch anyway, and brunch is really hard to like mess up. It, you know, more our vibe, more our style. And that's what we ended up going with, and it was like a phenomenal price, and that's how we said yes to our venue. So keep in mind, it is really kind of stressful when you're finding your venue. I don't even know how many venues we looked at, and it was difficult because sometimes we had to drive an hour away from our apartment, and we would be really tired like doing this. Like you have to spend, unless you find the right one right away and it satisfies all your criteria, you kind of have to make a lot of phone calls, ask for pricing up front, and then do all these tours, and then just keep exhausting. Like we never thought that we were gonna find the one. Honestly, like I said, like if we had just done our specific criteria at our guest range, like through filters on certain wedding venue websites, that venue would not have showed up on there. Just because, like I said, sometimes they have special pricing with like brunch, weekday, etc. So it's really stressful, but at the same time, if you look at it with perspective, you don't have a date set yet. You know, this is kind of like what snowballs into like stress, because you're like, oh my God, I have to find people who make this certain date. So take the time that you need, go like every other weekend or every weekend if you can, and look at venues and find something that you both love. This is something that you both should be doing together. So that concludes our what to consider when you're looking at a venue and our wedding venue vlog. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up if it's super informational for you guys. I always really appreciate that. And if you like my style, you can click my face here to subscribe, or you can watch these videos, which are pretty helpful when planning a wedding. Bye!